I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we can stand and say the pledge.
He moved it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We do have one person signed in wishing to speak, Mrs. Bishop. If you could stand, tell us your name and address, and you because you signed in ahead of time, you get 5 minutes to speak. Just so you understand, this is not a two-way conversation with the board. We're going to listen to what you have to say, and if there's something that we need to get back to you on, we will. So,
Right here?
yep, whatever you'd like.
Okay.
If you'd like to come up to the podium, you can do that as well.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, thank you Amherst School Board members for allowing me to speak today. My name is Robin Bishop and I am an Amherst mom of 3 students attending Windermere Boulevard Elementary and Amherst Middle. I'm a licensed master social work and a new volunteer group lead for the Buffalo chapter of Moms Demand Action Against Gun Violence. That's why I'm here today, to discuss an issue that I and all Amherst parents and caregivers are passionate about, keeping our students safe. After the horrors of the mass shooting at Tops in our own community of Buffalo and Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, the reality that this could happen anywhere made me finally look for ways to get involved to help prevent gun violence. That led me to Moms Demand Action, a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. I am also part of the Erie County Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. I know gun safety is a profoundly political issue, and I want to assure you that I'm not here to advocate for anything divisive. In just a few short months, I have learned a great deal about gun violence and prevention and read the latest research by AFT, NEA, and Everytown for Gun Safety, which I brought with me today. Here are a few of the statistics that stuck with me. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, firearms are now the leading cause of death for American children and teens. A national survey by Pew Research Center in 2018 found that 57% of teens are concerned that there will be a shooting in their school, and that was before the Buffalo shooting. These are heartbreaking statistics, but there are steps our community can take to prevent these tragedies and keep kids safe. One of our main goals of our group has become to promote the message of safe gun storage through the nonpartisan educational initiative Be Smart. The Be Smart stands for Secure All Guns in Your Homes and Vehicles, Model Responsible Behavior Around Guns, Ask about the presence of unsecured guns in the home, Recognize the role of firearms in suicide, and tell your peers to be smart. Amherst schools can make this program work because you already address many complex issues with the students through programs like the Lifeline Suicide Prevention Program. Adopting a safe storage program would complement that program and even enhance those efforts. My 2-part proposal is straightforward. First, I ask that the Be Smart educational materials be sent home to every family in the district before winter break. 4.6 million American children live in homes with guns that are loaded and unlocked. In addition, a study of targeted school violence incidents from 2018 to 2017 found that 76% of firearms were obtained from the home of a parent or close relative. The district can help protect its students, teachers, and staff by giving children and caregivers information about how to keep firearms out of the hands of children. Secondly, I ask that the district host a Be Smart training that is open to every middle school parent, while their children are also receiving the Lifeline's Suicide Prevention Program in school. Nearly 700 children living in America die by gun suicide every year, and secure storage can play a crucial role in preventing these deaths. When someone you love is showing warning signs that they might try to harm themselves, it's easy to feel helpless. But ensuring that any firearm in the home is safely secured is a very easy and impactful step. For someone in crisis, access or lack of access to a gun can genuinely be the difference between life and death. If you'd like more information on how to keep a loved one in crisis safe, I also have information on the ERPO, the Extreme Risk Protection Order. and I brought the Keeping Our Kids Safe study. I know the typical answer is that we are, as a district, are already doing a lot in terms of safety planning, and you definitely are. And everything takes time, but we can't afford this to take a long time, especially when the research and materials are already at our fingertips. Thank you, and if you have any other questions or want more information, please contact me.
Thank you very much.
I do have materials if anyone is interested in anything as well.
I can take those, and then
Fantastic.
we'll be able to distribute them to the board members.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any reports of boards and committees?
The technology committee met today. We had a very impactful presentation ourselves here from the technology team last week, Andrew Vaiella, and he gave basically the same update to the teachers that were in the room. There is the formation of they are building an internal cybersecurity advancement committee with the usual wide range of stakeholders that we see in all of our effective committees. He had discussed with us that schools are targets and that we have the tools and the team to combat the threat. We reviewed the work that we did as a committee in the fall, and there's a recognition that the teachers, as she put it, are a third, and a third. You could have new teachers rolling in at any time, and we want them to be able to understand how to implement the technology standards within their lesson planning, as well as a teacher that's been there for years. Digital fluency is key. We also highlighted that curriculum and technology are integrated and necessarily driven by a common leader. And I have to say that Dr. Shanahan is an amazing leader in that she understands both sides of what's happening and reaches out to the experts to help her understand how we can implement the things that we need to implement. And it's not necessarily an easy task. It had to start with figuring out what we were already doing and how some of this stuff was already integrated, which requires us to break down into grade level team groups, and it's pretty complicated to figure out, like for instance in the high school where you've got people that are in different tracks, and they don't all take the same classes. So maybe in their English class they're learning how to investigate using technology, but if somebody's not necessarily taking an advanced level English class, they don't, it's more complicated at the high school level. And so there were some pretty robust conversations about integrating curriculum and technology, and more to come. We have more meetings, and we'll get there. We're working on it. But it was a productive meeting. A lot happened today in a short period of time, so I have confidence that it'll come together.
Fantastic. Any other reports? All right, then we will move right into the superintendent's report.
Great. Our acting district clerk will provide us with an update on fund balance and reserves. Mrs. Bazinski, as you know, is filling in for Mrs. Custodi, who's on the road back from a conference. But we have what kicks off our budget development season, the first official presentation of budget development, one of many, where we review the final fund balance and reserves from last year and where we landed according to our long-range plan. Welcome.
Thank you so much. So this is our long-range reserve plan. We use the same format every year, and we update it about this time each year. So we'll review it tonight. This is our opportunity to have discussion on if we want to change any of our expectations with our funding levels or our plans for the reserves. And then we'll make any adjustments if necessary and present this to you at our next board meeting on December 6th for adoption. Then throughout budget development, we'll use this kind of as a guide to some of our decisions with reserves and our capital funds. And then we'll revisit it again at the end of the year when we're starting to look at fund balance. So every reserve follows the same outline, so I won't go through them line by line, but we'll talk about when it was created, what the purpose is for, how it's funded, how it's used. I think I monitor all of them, and then the current funding level, and then possible recommendations for next year. So our reserve for retirement contributions is our ERS payments. So those are our New York State employees who are not certified, who are classified. And our goal is to have 2 years worth of retirement system payments in this reserve. This allows us, in years where we have large swings in the ERS rate, to be able to offset some of those large swings with a reserve appropriation, which will help protect our tax levy from large swings up or down in our budget. Our current balance is just over $1 million, and to be fully funded at 2 years worth of retirement payments, we would need 1.4. So the recommendation of an increase would be $400,000. Reserve for Retirement Contributions Subfund is relatively new. This is just the 5th year of this reserve. And this is also in the retirement category, but for TRS employees, which are our certified employees, mostly our teachers. So previously this didn't exist. We could have a reserve for our ERS employees, but not our TRS employees. So we have added that in 2018. There are some more strict regulations on how this is funded. You can add up to 2% of your prior year TRS salaries each year, but you can't have more than 10% at any one point. So now that we're in our 5th year, we'd have the ability to have up to 10% if we had fully funded it each year. We did not fully, well, we put money in it in several years, we didn't fully fund it. So our current level is 1.3 million. If we were going to be fully funded, which would be 2% plus last year's balance, it would be 1.8 million, which would be an increase of 546,000. And that is the 2% maximum that we're allowed to contribute each year. Once it gets up to a point where it's been funded for a couple of years, we may not be able to add 2% again each year because you can only have up to 10% of prior year expenses. Again, this reserve in a year where we have large swings in our TRS balance will help us make sure that we don't have major hits to our budget, which then could negatively affect our tax levy. Employee benefit accrued liability. So this is a reserve that maps back to the accrued liability that we calculate each year. So this is a requirement on our governmental-wide financial statements, and we are required annually to calculate and disclose to the public if every employee left at the exact same time, how much would we be required to pay out in accrued benefits for vacation time, whatever the contracts allow for payments. If we shut our doors June 30th, how much would we owe to everybody? So this is something that we calculate every year for our auditors. Our calculation is just over $3 million. So technically our goal should be 100% of our liability. Not that we would ever think that everyone was going to leave all at one day, but we currently have just over $857,000 in this reserve. We have used it a couple times over the past 5 years to help fund some retirement payments as people are leaving at the end of the year. So we do have expenditure lines in our budget to cover some of those payments, but in a year where maybe we're anticipating that we're going to have more or a large number of people retiring, this is an avenue for us to help cover some of those costs. And again, this would all be decisions we'd make during budget development, and we would appropriate these reserves as part of the revenues for budget development. The reserve for unemployment insurance, we do not have insurance per se, we're claims based. So we pay actual unemployment claims for individuals who were employed by us and are no longer and are eligible for unemployment payments through New York State. So previously we wanted to have about 10 years worth of unemployment billings as a guide. COVID kind of skewed all of that. So we went a couple years where we had no payments we were receiving $500,000 of fraudulent unemployment claims. Then they were being reimbursed by New York State. So our averages have dropped significantly over the last couple years, where now a 10-year average is about $75,000, where previously it was almost $300,000. However, this year it seems to be starting to get back to normal. We have a $20,000 budget line each year, and our first quarter payment was just under $6,000. So that seems to be a little more where we were before. So at this point, we have $461,000 in the reserve, not making any recommendations to make changes quite yet, only because we don't know how things are gonna come back and what the expectations will be. So just to be conservative, the recommendation is to leave that one sit for now. Our tax certiorari reserve is a reserve that allows us to hold funds for the maximum liability for any claims against the district related to property assessment and tax bills. So every year we calculate what the maximum assessment is based on claims people have filed with the town, feeling that their properties are assessed too high. They are going through the process with the town with Article 7s or a SCAR report to have their assessments reduced. In such cases, if those are reduced, we do face the possibility of owing refunds to tax bills that have been paid if it's determined that the property was overassessed. So 100% of our calculated liability for current and pending claims is $198,000, almost $199,000. Our reserve currently sits at $111,000, which is about 56% of the maximum liability. We think that's a pretty good place to be because we always have, there's a lot of back and forth with that litigation and those cases. So about 56% is a safe spot to be until some of these cases are settled. Once the cases are settled, we review this annually and then we can make changes, either increasing it or decreasing it based on the cases that are still open. We have two capital reserves. The first one is from 2017 and it was $500,000 with a 10-year lifeline. We have fully funded that, so it now sits at $502,282, which is the $500,000 that we've put into the reserve, as well as interest that it has accrued over the last 5 years or so. So this fund has been included in the capital project vote that we will be putting before our voters on December 13th. So this was included as part of the funding source for the project. So if it is passed by the voters, we would then use the full $500,000 towards the funding of the capital project. So it would either then go down to zero at the end of this year or maybe at the end of next year, depending on when we would need those first couple payments for project expenses. The same thing can be said for the second reserve, which was established in 2021, but it was a larger capital reserve. It was $10 million, also over 10 years. To date, we have funded $2 million of it, and again, that $2 million has been included in the proposed project that will go to the voters in December. So similar to the smaller reserve, if the project passes, we'll either fund that money into the capital fund by the end of this current fiscal year or in the next one, depending on when funds are needed to make capital project payments. This reserve will then still have room, it won't close because it will still have room to receive in another $8 million of funding, which would be for a future project. It wouldn't be for a current project, but it would be for a future project. The benefit of having these reserves, aside from lowering the tax impact on our taxpayers, is that it gives us $2.5 million that we can start the project with before we need to go out to borrow. So it helps reduce the time that we need to borrow and helps reduce the amount we need to borrow. Then the following three items are not necessarily reserves, but they are important to our budget development. The first one is unassigned fund balance, and this most of us know is the 4% limit of fund balance. We are compliant this year at 3.99%, so it's 4% of our current year budget, so $2.7 million. And then next year, we also want to remain compliant, but it would be 4% of next year's budget. So assuming a budget increase of 3%, which is just an assumption, that would raise our allowable compliant dollar amount to $2.8 million. Assigned fund balance are fund balance and monies that we have promised to the current year budget. And we did that during budget development and at year end. So $1.735 million. The $1 million was part of budget development, and we have an equal expenditure line to offset that. And that is in the event of unplanned expenditures, emergencies, health insurance coming in higher than expected. We have that line in our budget, but we support it with fund balance so that we're not overtaxing the taxpayers by asking them to support through taxes $1 million of payments that we may or may not need. So we apply our fund balance to it, and it kind of levels itself off. The $735,000 are purchase orders that we had in place last year, but for whatever reason, we didn't close at the end of the year. It's either services were planned but not completed, or orders were made and placed, but the items hadn't been received yet. So we didn't make the payments prior to June 30th, so we roll the PO over into the current year so that we have more time to make sure the goods are in, the services are done before we process the payment. So we do anticipate that those funds will be spent this year because they were promised last year for a specific reason. So we do expect those to be spent, but going into next year, we'll have the same thing. There's always purchase orders that we carry over from year to year. And then our debt service fund. So this is another type of fund balance. It's restricted fund balance because we are only allowed to use it to reduce the tax cap calculation by paying debt or offsetting capital expenses. So these monies were derived from unspent bond proceeds or premiums that we received during the 2016 capital project, which we're just finishing. So we have $239,000, which does include interest that it's earned over the last few years. And our plan is to use half of it this year because it does affect our tax cap calculation because it lowers it because we're bringing more revenue in. But that's the purpose of it. It lowers our tax burden on our community. So if we use half of it this year, we'll have another half to use next year. So we're kind of spreading that out over 2 fiscal years. And then that reserve or that fund will be down to zero, but it will still be open in case we have any premiums or unspent bond proceeds from potentially the upcoming capital project. And that's all.
You can also put unexpended funds from the capital project in there as well, right? To offset future debt service payments?
Yes. Are there any questions or comments or any plans that you want to adjust right now? Or are we good with this the way it is? We'll present it to you on December 6th for adoption, and then we'll use it to guide our thoughts and decisions during budget development, and then bring it back to you in March, April, when we're starting to look at fund balance projections and what we want to do with possibly any unspent monies at the end of this upcoming year.
Is there, so just like for instance on the $500,000 that in the last 5 years has made $2,000, is there nothing we can do to make more money on our money?
Well, now interest rates obviously have climbed over the last few years. All of our tax revenues came in and our first state aid payment came in October. So our treasurer, Ms. Williams, works on a laddered approach to treasury bills. So we take the largest amount of money that we can tie up for the most significant amount of time and put it in the highest rate possible. So we are in the process of doing that. I do expect those revenues to increase drastically over this upcoming year. Over the past few years, interest rates were 0.02 and 0.1. They were just very low. But now with the interest rates climbing, we're already in the process of increasing those dollars of interest earnings through the staggered investments.
But to build on it, for like these capital project money, can't we tie that up longer? Obviously, we're not gonna use it or pay it out in any short term, right? Is that separate from what the other stuff you're doing
We
with the
can-
tax revenues and state aid?
We can still invest it, and some of the monies from the current capital fund were invested. We just need to make sure we leave enough liquid, because we do have expenses for the project even before the project starts construction. We have legal fees and construction manager fees and architect fees. So we start using these monies for our pre-construction costs. But yes, once we have some cash flows, and we'll work with both Turner Construction and Rick Yancey, our financial advisor, on cash flow projections for the project, assuming it passes, then we'll have an idea of how much money we'll need from month to month, and then we invest anything above and beyond that.
Because all of these reserve accounts, we could tie up for longer periods, right? Because
Yes.
we're not looking to potentially touch them until
No,
July 1
absolutely.
of next year.
Yep, and it's one of the first reserves, or one of the first fundings that Ms. Williams will do. And then the second one is approximately $5 to $6 million, which is typically our June balloon payment for our teachers who elect to have smaller paychecks through the year, so that they get one big one in June that carries them through the summer. It's usually between $5 and $6 million, so that's another lump sum that we usually tie up for 8 months or so that it matures the end of May, early June, because we get higher rates that way.
Yeah, but there is some caution about tying up our reserves in longer term investments, in the sense that our cash flow cycle at times leaves us at a shortage of cash flow. And in particular, it's normally around the end of August, September, because we're waiting for our tax revenue to come in, and we're waiting for our state aid payments. So in many school districts, they will borrow money in the form of a short-term borrowing known as a TAN, a tax anticipation note. And we have not done that here because there's closing costs and there's an interest rate associated with that. Even though it gets paid back in a matter of a couple months, it could still cost you $20,000 or more in interest and in closing costs. So what we often do is rely on our reserves for cash flow purposes to bridge us through when our revenue starts coming in. So I would just be a little hesitant to tie that up for any extended period of time, because that could end up costing us money, when we're waiting for our revenues to come in.
No, I was just referring to like between now and the end of the school year, since
Oh, yeah.
we wouldn't be looking to touch it till the end of the school year
Correct.
in new budget and
Yes.
stuff, so.
Yeah, so 3 months,
Instead of your
6
laddered
months,
approach
yeah.
of 3 months, 6, whatever.
That
Yeah,
makes
some of
sense.
it can definitely go the 8 to 9 months to get us through the end to June. And then some of it we do smaller amounts so that it's maturing every month for the cash flow that's needed.
Great.
Well, thank you for that, Mrs. Bazinski. I know we have a lot of discussion in June and August about our reserves and our comfort with the funding level, and it's nice to see that come together in a long-range plan, and it's a nice resource for us, as you said, for budget development. So switching gears, I'd like to invite Dr. Shanahan to talk to you briefly about our strategic plan reset plan. As you all know, we spent pretty much a year in 2016-17 creating a 5-year strategic plan that we were 3 years into when all of a sudden the COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything got kind of put on the back burner, and we focused on reinventing everything we did in the school district in the world of COVID restrictions. So now that we're back with normal education, and we're back to school as we had known it pre-COVID. We want to make sure we get our strategic plan reset and we set the stage for future years. So we have a plan to revise our plan, which Dr. Shanahan will review.
There's a little rapping going on
Yeah.
there.
I don't know if it's like a reset, a reboot, a revise, it's all of those things. So originally, like Mr. Pinella said, and we originally worked with the Warner School of Education from the University of Rochester, and they partnered with us to create the 2017 to the 2022 plan. So really quick walk down memory lane. This was a 5-year plan, as Mr. Pinella said. We had great artifacts coming out of this to guide the work that we do in our classrooms with our students to create strong teaching and learning, good community for our students to be in. And so we want to maintain the strong pieces and update. I'll share with you in a minute. There's some changes that need to be made. So this originally started in the spring of 2015, as Mr. Pinella said, and the Warner School of Education was critical in helping us to collect the data. You need multiple data points from multiple stakeholders going through this. So at that time, just to kind of jar your memory here, a lot of you were involved, I saw the committees from then. Qualitative data, interviews, focus group surveys were collected from multiple stakeholders to get a lot of different perspectives on this, people that touch the school district in different ways. Quantitative data was also prepared. So these data were then pulled together and shared with the Strategic Planning Council. This was 42 stakeholders. It was made up of school community members such as students, teachers, staff, and administration, and then community stakeholders, which were parents, Board of Education members, and community leaders. They were charged with analyzing the data that I just spoke of a second ago, and what they did was they identified 3 major priority areas, which are all going to be familiar to you in a minute, establish initiatives and action steps which allowed us to reach our priorities. So the structure we were left with is we have 3 priorities, 15 initiatives, and 36 action steps. What we're looking at in the revision is to, and I'll show you why in a minute, is to really focus on the initiatives and the action steps because of obviously what we've been through recently. These are our priorities, learning and achievement, student life, and Amherst pride. They're global, they're broad enough to fit. We feel that will be, maintaining those will have led us well so far, these priorities, and we want to maintain that. So we had, as Mr. Pinella said, we had the pandemic, which impacted our initiatives a little bit, maybe the wording, but mostly our action steps. So what we need to do right now is in that structure, go back specifically into those areas and do revisions. And some of the reasons for this is we had to teach differently. We had to deliver instruction differently. We had to keep our kids safe in different ways. And so we want to go back and we want to revisit those 3 priorities, initiatives, but basically the action steps across the 5 years. So we are again partnering with the Warner Center. We are partnering with Lynn Ertl. We've been in contact with her and she has been working with us to reset, help us to get the data collected and turn this around in an effective way. So here's the revised timeline. I pulled this in as revised because we had a really ambitious one and then reality hit. And so this is the revised timeline that we have put together. Last Tuesday, on November 8th, Mr. Pinella and I met with the representatives from the administrative team. So we met with all the building principals and then district office administration. And we shared this plan with them. As I said, we went over one in the summer that was a little bit more ambitious than this, but this seems to be something that we can enact and do a high quality job of it. And then we also gave a survey out to our teachers and we gave them time on the superintendent conference day to provide us with feedback as to the strategic plan. What the administrative team left with is a little bit of homework. So for our meeting tomorrow, we have a cabinet meeting with them. What they did is they went back to all the action items and the initiatives within the strategic plan, and on a 1 to 5 Likert scale, they identified if they thought those action items were accomplished, still in need of accomplishment, and they actually got to the point of, do we actually need that action step anymore? Because we've changed how we do business a little bit. And so is it still relevant? Or is it not anymore? And then we also are leaving space for, there are a lot of action steps that we took that weren't in the strategic plan because we were required to do so when we were reinventing school for the past 2 years. We have some really good practices that are in place, and we want to make sure that they get captured into this plan as well. So what the administrators are doing with in their buildings is they're scoring the action items to see how they feel of the level of accomplishment has been and the relevance today. That data will be given tomorrow to Lynn Ertl in a meeting that we have. They're going to rate and provide evidence for any statements for their score. So they have to provide evidence as well. Then they will leave. They don't know yet. They're getting homework tomorrow night too. Then they're going to look at years 4 and 5, and they're going to do the same thing again with years 4 and 5. And then on December 7th, the administrative representatives, which again are just the building principals, when they leave these administrative rep meetings, they go and they do all the work as their entire building team, and then they come back. So everybody's represented, but we have to run buildings as well during these meetings and keep everybody safe. So the administrative reps will meet. At that time, Lynn is going to spend the day with us, Ertl from the University of Rochester, the Warner Center. She is going to review the survey results and present those findings to us from years 1 through 3 and through years 4 and 5 action items. Then she'll have all the data she needs to recommend a revised strategic plan to Mr. Piniella and I the week of December 26th. We will then take that draft and we will bring that to the Strategic Planning Council, and they will have a chance to go through as well and critique and revise that plan. Once we feel like it is in shape and ready, we will present that plan to the board for approval. When that is approved, we will then start our regular process that we've done for years, which is it goes down to the building strategic planning teams again, and they'll work with their committees. So that year 23, 24, we get back to the strategic plan guiding the work that we do. One of the most impressive things that happened when I came here 5 years ago was to actually see a strategic plan that was used the way it was intended. It guides our decision making, it guides budget decisions, it guides instructional materials. It really does capture the work that we do and the focus that we have. So I'm excited to get this back on track, get the rails, back on the track there for the 23-24 school year. So that is the revised timeline that we're on, and questions?
Thank you.
So you may recall, we've also temporarily put on the back burner our board retreat because prior to COVID, we had met and talked about goals, and also the administrators would come and present their building plans for the year as they had drafted them over the spring and summer months leading into the fall and rolled them out in their buildings. So I'm hoping this will also give us that opportunity to get back to that practice as well. So it is definitely a reboot, feels a little bit like recovery in some sense, as we've moved away from the scramble of the last few years and the COVID pandemic. So thank you. That's all I have.
All right. We will need a motion for new business items.
I'll make a motion for new business items E1, A through D, 2A through E, 3, C, and F.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have some big things on here.
Yeah.
All those in favor of approving new business items E1, A through D, 2A through E, and 3C and F, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Ashley, I'd like to welcome you to the team. I see you start on Thursday right away, so congratulations. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I can't wait to start.
We can't wait to have you. Ms. Bazinski, do we have any follow-up items? All right, and we will need a motion to convene to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dr. Griesmer's here. It's a little bittersweet. John and I sat in that audience together like in 2012 when he was appointed middle school assistant principal and I was appointed director of curriculum and instruction. And we've had a lot of good times together, working together. And I've often been able to talk about John when people ask me about him. And I always say he's the best colleague you could ever ask for. He's collaborative, he's professional, he's hardworking, he's a good communicator. So I'm sad to see you moving on from Amherst, but I know you always have a special part of Amherst with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you doing great things and maybe sitting at another table together with you someday where we can continue our collaborative efforts. So congratulations on your new position. And thank you for everything you've done, not only for our school district and our community, but also for me personally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know we're not going to get out of here without you saying a few words.
You didn't say you were a good communicator.
17 maybe one last honors breakfast speech.
I was just reminiscing about those those honorable breakfast, speeches,
But I just wanted to thank Superintendent Pinella and the board. And I know I wrote to all of you and meant everything that I said. But 10 years is a long time. A lot of board meetings, a lot of presentations, and I just want to thank you for your support of our school and for me in both of my roles. Not only as board members, but as I look around, I'm pretty certain I've had everybody's children at this table. Several of them, in fact, from all of you each. So that's a pretty cool thing, and this is a really special place and pretty great chapter of my life. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I guess we need a motion to convene to executive session.
I'll make a motion to convene to executive session for negotiations and employment of a particular person.
Do we have a second? Sridhar? All in favor of convening to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming.